Hi, welcome to Sunday Extra. We're so glad you have decided to join with us today. Leighton Ford Ministries is building a global network of missional-minded mentors who love to invest in healthy leaders for the sake of the gospel. This week, ministry leaders involved in our Mentoring American Pastors initiative will gather for time to talk, pray, and discern what our next steps will be for this particular ministry endeavor. Please pray with us for direction and discernment this week as we seek to continue investing in the lives of pastors. The Bible reminds us, remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. That's Hebrews 13:7. In today's Sunday Extra, Jim Singleton and Ken Shigematsu reflect on the impact Leighton Ford has made on both of their lives. One aspect of mentoring healthy leaders is the art of asking good questions. Jim and Ken discuss how Leighton asks significant questions of younger leaders to find out where God is at work in their lives. This conversation came from a special gathering in October of 2025 celebrating the start of our new Jeanie's Vision initiative. So let's listen in as Jim and Ken reflect on how Leighton Ford had a big impact on their lives this week on Sunday Extra.
I'm going to invite Jim Singleton and Ken Shigematsu to come up, who've been a part of Dad's work for many years. I shouldn't call it work. They've been part of Dad's relationship and friendship. Ken is the pastor of 10th Church in Vancouver, British Columbia. Before Ken took over as the pastor of that church, there were 20 pastors in 20 years. Is that right? So think about what he was walking into. 20 pastors in 20 years. And he wasn't sure about that, so he reached out to my dad to have some conversations, and Dad walked him through that journey. Ken is also the recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Award in Canada, which was awarded to one of the most outstanding citizens in Canada for contributions he's made to the country. Also, World Vision gave him an award as the children's hero. So Ken is a delightful person. Jim Singleton, the first time I ever met him, I didn't meet him. I left a copy of my book on his desk and told him to call me. He never did. He was a pastor at First Pres in Colorado Springs, but about a year later he called me. We've become great friends ever since. He taught at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, and just recently helped start a new seminary called the Flourish Institute of Theology. So two brilliant guys here, and I've asked them to have a conversation about their relationship with my father and mentoring, and why mentoring is so important, why that arm around the shoulder is so important for people who are in ministry. Guys?
Thank you very much. Great to see all of you here. I'm going to give you a scripture from Hebrews chapter 13, verse 7 to kind of kick us off. And I want you to all think about this one in the realms you live in. It says this: remember your leaders who spoke the word of God to you. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Consider the outcome of their life and imitate their faith. So Ken and I want to have a little conversation about influence from somebody that was just up here. And so, Ken, would you get us started by just reminding this group of how you first encountered Leighton Ford? Where, maybe two places where that came about.
Sure. So Leighton mentioned that he had gone to Wheaton College as a Canadian. I sort of followed in his footsteps unconsciously. I'm originally from Japan, but grew up in Vancouver, Canada, and ended up there. At the end of my freshman year, I was invited to a gathering of younger evangelists from different parts of the world called Amsterdam 86. There were 174 nations, I think, represented. And at the conference, Billy Graham got up, and I remember him standing beside Leighton and saying, my brother-in-law is about to leave our ministry to start a new ministry focused on developing younger emerging leaders. I'm one of 8,000 in the group, so it's a pretty large gathering. And I just say under my breath, I would love to one day meet Leighton and come under his mentoring influence. And we met briefly. I don't think Leighton probably remembers that because there were a lot of people. But then 6 years later, I'm a student at Gordon Conwell Seminary just north of Boston. I'm also enrolled in the Arrow program as part of the first cohort. Leighton comes into Boston to visit with one of his board members, and he arranges for me to pick him up. So I don't even own a car at this point in my life. Borrow a friend's car, vacuum it, and then pick up Leighton. It's about 10 p.m. at Logan Airport there in Boston, and he gets into the vehicle, and I recall, it's being quite late. I said, Leighton, or Dr. Ford, you've had probably a long day of travel. Why don't you recline the seat? The seat does recline, and you can just relax and rest. And he said, well, I don't think I'll rest, but I will recline. So he crosses his long legs, and he reclines the chair, and then he looks at me and says, now tell me your life story. I start talking, and then he falls asleep. Not really. He listened to my story attentively for 45 minutes, an hour, however long it took us to get to Western Massachusetts. And that's been kind of a symbol of his relationship with me, always available and love to listen to my story. I'm Japanese, Canadian, so more private and reserved by nature, but there's something about the power of Leighton's look and presence and listening and the love that emanates from him that sort of helps me to reveal what's going on inside me, and it's been a gift.
Perfect. And amazingly, I have a very similar story. This one was a chance non-meeting. I was born May the 30th, 1956 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And Billy Graham was there leading a crusade, and Leighton Ford was there with him on May the 30th, 1956. But Leighton didn't come visit me in the hospital, so I missed it. But same thing, I was around Gordon Conwell, and I was asked in 1989 to go pick up Leighton Ford at the airport and drive him to a board meeting. And as I picked him up, I didn't invite him to lean back. I missed that one, but he did the same thing. He said, tell me your story. And I was trying to figure out what would I even talk about with Leighton Ford, and he was so gentle and so interested. And if you can imagine this, I began telling him about a dissertation I was writing about evangelism in the Southern Presbyterian Church and what happened to it. And Leighton was so interested, he said, would you pull over at this coffee shop? And I just want to sit down and hear more about this. And you realize at that point in my life, no one wanted to hear more about that dissertation that I was writing. But that started this arm around the shoulder in the same way. All right, Ken, now tell a little bit about maybe some of the impact Leighton has had on you personally. How would you describe that?
So I mentioned that I enrolled in the Arrow Leadership Program when I was a student at Gordon Conwell. And I remember gathering for our first cohort meeting. There were about 25 of us. And we were on a break. And I remember we were standing in a circle, sort of informally, and one of the pastors from Southern California looked around the circle and said, we're all like fighter pilots in the movie Top Gun. We're sizing each other up as rivals. And when he said that, I looked around and I thought, I think that I'm maybe the youngest person here, certainly the least experienced in Christian ministry, because I've come from the corporate world. And I remember feeling all of these emotions of, do I belong here? I hope Leighton Ford doesn't feel like he made a big mistake in admitting me to the program. And there was a part of me that wanted to shrink back and go small, didn't want to raise my hand to say something really stupid in class, but there was also another part of me that wanted to prove myself. And I remember one afternoon we were somewhere here in the state of North Carolina in front of a 100-foot cliff, and it was a team building exercise, not a competition. But I saw it as a competition. And I tried to clock the fastest time I could to the top. Trying really hard to win Leighton's acceptance and the acceptance of my peers. And as a younger person in ministry, I had some stumblings and failings, including getting into a conflict with someone I was working with because of my own emotional immaturity. And this is what I discovered in my failure, that Leighton's love and acceptance of me was not based on my performance. It was just there. And realizing that felt like such a gift. And I feel now, more than 3 decades later, I can just be myself in his presence. Laugh, weep, just be who I am. And that's been a great gift. Yeah. It's been a mirror of God's love for me.
Somewhat similar, I got invited to the same Arrow ministry program. But I was too chicken to even sign up and go. Other people I knew were in it, and I thought, I better not do that. I will just flop. So I didn't do it. And I spent the next years in ministry in a lot of different places. And finally, as Kevin said, I asked him to come to Colorado Springs and help us with some things in that church. And in that period of time, I was in this moment of strange transition where I had been invited to go teach in a seminary, but I'm a pastor and I couldn't figure out how to make that decision. And my wife, Sarah, was a student of Leighton's in a Doctor of Ministry program in Massachusetts. And both she and Kevin, one day apart, said, I think maybe you ought to go talk to Leighton, or I think you ought to go talk to my dad. And so I had not had a conversation with Leighton since 1989. But in 2010, I came here to Charlotte at Leighton's invitation, and he sat down in his study with a yellow notepad and just began asking me question after question after question. And then he would say, did you notice how this relates to this? What do you make of that? And I hadn't noticed any of those things. And it was during that time in Charlotte where I discerned I had a new call to be a professor in a seminary, but it was because of the questions Leighton asked. Remember your leaders, those who first spoke to you the word of truth. Consider the outcome of their life. Imitate their faith. Okay, Ken, how did Leighton and his shaping, how would you say it might have affected you as the pastor of 10th Church?
As Kevin mentioned, I came to a church in the city of Vancouver back in 1996 that had cycled through 20 pastors in 20 years. And it had gone from over 1,000 in its heyday in the 1950s to 100 and something. It was thinking about closing its doors. And on one of the first days on the job, the secretary walked into my office and looked at me and said, Ken, if the ship sinks now, everyone's going to blame you because you were the last captain at the helm. She was trying to motivate me to work harder, but I just felt depressed and burdened. And not long after, Leighton happened to be in Vancouver, and we were sitting in my car outside of the church, and I was feeling very discouraged for a number of reasons, and just desperate for some encouragement. But I just felt too ashamed to ask for that. That would just come off like a loser if I say I needed encouragement. So instead, I thought it would sound better if I say, Leighton, can you give me some counsel? And so I remember him crossing his long legs again in the car. There's a theme here. And he just sort of rubbed his chin for a moment. And he looked at me and said, Ken, remember that God is an artist. He will not lead you to copy anyone else. So seek God for a unique vision for this place. And so I took those words to heart and prayed, invited others to pray, and then God led us in a very unexpected direction, which included a ministry to folks without homes, people who were homeless. But we saw a stream of people from all different backgrounds, not just people without homes, but people from business, the arts, the world of academics, sport, coming to know Christ. And so that was impactful. And if I can share one more example, I don't know if it's because I'm originally from Japan or just because of the challenge of the church that we were facing, but I did and continue to have some workaholic tendencies. And even though it was my, quote, job to help people connect more deeply with Jesus, I was having a difficult time doing that in my own life. And right around that really busy season, Leighton invited me to join him with some of you. I know the Davidsons were there on a pilgrimage to some of the holy places of Ireland. Ireland is not the old country for me, obviously. But I was eager for a change of pace and scenery. And I remember we visited some of the ancient monasteries in Ireland and learned about the monastic way and the wisdom of the monks and something they described as a rule of life, which enabled them to experience the monks' God is alive and real, not just as they were praying formally in a chapel, but as they were working out in the field, alive and real as they were studying in a library, alive and real as they were preparing a meal in a kitchen. And I was hungry to experience God as alive and real in every part of my life, so I went back to Vancouver, put into practice some of the simple habits we learned from the wisdom of the monks, and they would change my life and make the ministry at 10th sustainable. I've been there now for more than 29 years, and it was thanks to Leighton that this door to this contemplative, nourishing path with Jesus opened up, and out of that some writing and some mentoring of others too. So.
And can follow up with mentoring of others as Leighton has mentored us. How has that manifest itself in your life, the investment in the next generation?
Yeah, so sometime after becoming pastor at 10th, I was invited to teach for the Sandy Ford Fellowship, the scholarship program in Sandy's honor. And out of that, I began mentoring a small group of younger emerging pastors and leaders that embarrassingly was named the Shiggies. My last name is Shigematsu. Shiggies is easier to say. And I mentored them for several years, from about 2006 to maybe 2014, 15. And now they're self-led, but I've mentored other groups as well, including more recently a group of pastors from Japan by Zoom. And at our last meeting, one of the pastors on the Zoom call said, a year ago, I didn't envision myself being still in ministry, but because of your mentorship, I'm still at my church, still serving. And then this surprised me, another pastor on the call said, when you talked about Leighton Ford coming into your life, I knew that would never happen for me, but then you came into my life. And so, it felt like my gratitude welled up in my heart, partly because, as you said, it was a kind of unconscious evidence that I had in some way imitated Leighton Ford as Leighton has imitated Jesus and investing in other leaders.
It's as if there are more grandchildren than just these three around the table. As he mentors us, we mentor others, and Leighton multiplies. So, lots of those. All right, Kevin, come up and lead us in the next exercise.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Sunday Extra. I hope that conversation was a blessing to you. If you'd like to support all that Leighton Ford Ministries is doing, you can click on the QR code right here in the corner, and it will take you to the website where it will give you all the different ways that you can help support through your finances, as well as praying for all the things that God is doing. We're so excited of everything that's going on right now, and we just hope that you would join with us. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and we will see you right back here next week on Sunday Extra. Have a great week.